I would like to welcome everyone to the 8th day of the session, Friday, February 3rd, 2023. 18th day of the session. Maybe I said 8th. So today in history, February 3rd, 1919, the legislature passes a joint resolution in favor of national women's suffrage. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Convening roll call for the 18th day, February 3rd, 2023. Alamand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart?
Excused.
Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Plouston? Conrad? Crago?
Excused.
Davis? Eklund?
Excused.
Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom?
Excused.
Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley?
Excused.
Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez-Williams? Sherwood?
Excused.
Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Sherwood? Oakley? Crago?
Did you get Eklund? Eklund's here. You got him. No, Eklund is here. Okay. All right. All right. I would like to welcome Representative Obermuller for the prayer of the day. Please rise.
Dear God, after a week of sometimes emotional and contentious debate, restore in each of us the attributes of the spiritual person: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Grant to us safe passage this weekend and physical and mental restoration, so that we may continue this important work for the state of Wyoming. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Representative Obermuller. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The House will please come to order. Journal Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of February 2nd, 2023 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Representatives Chestick and Ward.
So our doctor of the day today is Dr. Hillary Western. Privilege of the floor, Representative Western.
Members, real quick, I just want to introduce our doctor of the day. She's a woman whose exceptional beauty and grace is only surpassed by her incredible intelligence, her motivation, and her drive to use medicine to make people healthier. I am so incredibly proud and honored to introduce my wife, and would you give her a warm house welcome?
Hey! Dr. Western, thanks for joining us. Chief Clerk, do you have a little bit of the roll call left to do?
Yes, Burkhart. Newsom,
Excused.
61 aye, 1 excused. 61 present.
Messages from the Senate. Oh, we got a privilege. Representative Sherwood, privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today in the gallery, we have with us students from Cheyenne South and Central, Rock River, Laramie High School, representing their schools' GSAs for Wyoming Quality Youth Lobby Day. And you can go and visit with them this afternoon in the extension for lunch. Good morning.
Welcome to the House. Anybody else with a privilege? Messages from the Senate.
Message 234, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 101, Wyoming Legal Tender Act Amendments. Ayes 16, noes 15. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
We're at that order of business of Senate files on first reading. The first Senate file for our consideration is Senate File number 23.
Senate File 23, sponsored by Judiciary.
First reading of the bill.
Treatment courts transferred to judicial branch.
Senate File 23 is referred to Committee Number 1 Judiciary. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 24.
Senate File 24, sponsored by Judiciary.
First reading of the bill.
Financial exploitation of vulnerable adults.
Senate File 24 is referred to Committee Number 1 Judiciary. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 36.
Senate File 36, sponsored by Capital Finance.
First reading of the bill.
Investment Funds Committee, Selection Panel Amendments.
Senate File 36 is referred to Committee Number 2 Appropriations. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 39.
Senate File 39, sponsored by Revenue.
First reading of the bill.
Board of Equalization, questions before the board.
Senate File 39 is referred to Committee Number 3 Revenue. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 48.
Senate File 48, sponsored by Education.
First reading of the bill.
Education, Suspension and Expulsion Model Policies.
Senate File 48 is referred to Committee Number 4 Education. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 49.
Senate File 49, sponsored by Education.
First reading of the bill.
Safe School and Climate Act Amendments.
Senate File 49 is referred to Committee Number 4 Education. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 28.
Senate File 28, sponsored by Tribal.
First reading of the bill.
Livestock Infectious Disease Control, Tribal Inclusion.
Senate File 28 is referred to Committee Number 5 Agriculture. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 58.
Senate File 58, sponsored by Travel.
First reading of the bill.
Sutton Archaeological Site Administration.
Senate File 58 is referred to Committee Number 6 Travel. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 2.
Senate File 2, sponsored by Corporations.
First reading of the bill.
Wyoming Telecommunications Act, sunset date.
Senate File 2 is referred to Committee Number 7 Corporations. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 13.
Senate File 13, sponsored by Corporations.
First reading of the bill.
Bar and Grill Liquor License Amendments.
Senate File 13 is referred to Committee Number 7 Corporations. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 14.
Senate File 14, sponsored by Transportation.
First reading of the bill.
Wyoming National Guard Professional Malpractice Liability.
Senate File 14 is referred to Committee Number 8 Transportation. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 77.
Senate File 77, sponsored by Minerals.
First reading of the bill.
Public Works Apprenticeship Programs repeal.
Senate File 77 is referred to Committee Number 9 Minerals. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 78.
Senate File 78, sponsored by Minerals.
First reading of the bill.
Apprenticeship and Job Training Promotion in Schools.
Senate File 78 is referred to Committee Number 9, Minerals. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 4.
Senate File 4, sponsored by Labor.
First reading of the bill.
North American Industry Classification System Amendments.
Senate File 4 is referred to Committee Number 10, Labor. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 10.
Senate File 10, sponsored by Labor.
First reading of the bill.
Licensed Professional Counselor Compact.
Senate File 10 is referred to Committee Number 10, Labor. Yep. We're at that order of business of bills on second reading. So what I'm going to do, I am not at that order of business. So reports from standing committees.
House Bill 188, sponsored by Winter. Wolf Depredation Compensation. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 188, Wolf Depredation Compensation. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Zwanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. House Bill 192, sponsored by Representative Clouston. Education, K-12 Food Service Program, an act relating to education. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 192, Education, K-12 Food Service Program. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Zwanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. House Bill 223, sponsored by Representative Summers. Wyoming Preschool Provider Grants, an act relating to education. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 223, Wyoming Preschool Provider Grants. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Zwanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. House Bill 270, sponsored by Representative Northrup. Improvement and Service Districts Limitations, an act relating to improvement and service districts. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 270, Improvement and Service Districts Limitations. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Zwanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. House Bill 284 is sponsored by Representative Walters. Collection Agency Regulation, Debt Buyers, an act relating to collection agencies. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 284, Collection Agency Regulation, Debt Buyers. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Zwanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
We're at that order of business of bills on second reading. We didn't have any re-referrals, correct? All right, we are at that order of business of bills on second reading. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do today on second reading is we know that there's two bills that have amendments in the works. And so we're going to lay those bills back. And then the rest of the bills, I will go through the standard second reading on reading them in, because those are the only two bills we know of that had amendments on. So Majority Whip Western.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to House Rule 7-3, I'd like to lay back House Bill 195 and House Bill 38 one day.
Seeing no objection, House Bill 38 and House Bill 195 have been laid back one day. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File 27.
House Bill 27.
House Bill 27, yes. Sorry about that.
House Bill 27, sponsored by School Facilities. School Facilities Consolidated Remediation Schedule, an act relating to Consolidated School Facility Remediation Schedule for public schools.
House Bill 27 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 52.
House Bill 52, sponsored by Management Council. The Reviser's Bill, an act relating to the revision of statutes and other legislative enactments.
House Bill 52 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 100.
House Bill 100, sponsored by Representative Jennings. Acquisition Value Study, an act relating to property tax.
House Bill 100 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 123.
House Bill 123, sponsored by Representative Berger. Collection of antler or horns by residents and non-residents, an act relating to game and fish.
House Bill 123 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 127.
House Bill 127, sponsored by Representative Angelos. Healthcare Facilities and Clergy, an act relating to public health and safety.
House Bill 127 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 140.
House Bill 140, sponsored by Representative Zawanitzer Dan. Mental Health Care Access, Collaborative Care Model, an act relating to health insurance.
House Bill 140 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 165.
House Bill 165, sponsored by Representative O'Hearn. Living Organ Donor Protection, an act relating to insurance.
House Bill 165 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 171.
House Bill 171, sponsored by Representative Byron. Notice of state land leases and local opportunities, an act relating to state lands.
House Bill 171 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 175.
House Bill 175, sponsored by Representative Strzok. Excused absence, state fair events, an act relating to student attendance.
House Bill 175 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 180.
House Bill 180, sponsored by Representative Davis. Brucellosis testing, notification requirements, an act relating to agriculture, livestock, and other animals.
House Bill 180 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 183.
House Bill 183, sponsored by Appropriations. Parimutuel and gaming activities, amendments, an act relating to gaming.
House Bill 183 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 213.
House Bill 213, sponsored by Representative Burkhart. Energy Production Inventory Exemption, an act relating to ad valorem taxation.
House Bill 213 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 229.
House Bill 229, sponsored by Representative Larson, JT. Electronic payment of sales and use taxes, an act relating to sales and use taxes.
House Bill 229 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is, is House Bill 239.
House Bill 239, sponsored by Representative Singh. Vehicle idling, decriminalization, an act relating to motor vehicles.
House Bill 239 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 286.
House Bill 286, sponsored by Representative Nicholas. ETS consolidation, an act relating to the administration of government.
House Bill 286 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. So everyone, the packet of amendments, if you so choose to have the hard copies, are in the back. And so I'll just kind of stand at ease for a couple of minutes while you guys all retrieve your budget amendments. Okay, if the House would please come to order. We are at that order of business of House Budget Bill on third reading. The reading clerk will read in the bill.
House Bill 1, sponsored by Appropriations. General Government Appropriations, an act relating to the supplemental appropriations for the operation of the state government for the fiscal biennium commencing July 1st, 2022 and ending June 30th, 2024, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have amendments. First amendment, third reading amendment number 1 is Representative Walters.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Brown, what's your point?
I'm just curious if we have received or if you have a list of how the amendments are going to go in order, or if the listing that was given to us just out here is in order.
So Representative Brown, I will have the chief clerk or somebody send out by email that list. There's probably a corrected copy. Your packet is in order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate it.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I would like to move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill number 1 and ask for your favorable consideration. And what this does, members, is it adds $40,000 special revenue, which is the investment earnings fund, for the purpose of increasing the budget authority for one position within that office. And this will then be seen as an exception request in next year's budget. And in doing so, this will, by being able to pay this individual a little bit more, it will actually reduce by over $200,000 what we're paying in the Series 900 contract services within that office. So it's a good deal for the state of Wyoming, and would ask for your favorable consideration on amendment number 1, third reading.
Anybody for their first time? Second time? All those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 1 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 1 has been adopted. Representatives Wanitzer Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pleased to move third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 1. Ask for your favorable introduction. So ladies and gentlemen, you'll see in future amendments, I'm trying to give this body back $1.5 million. But one of the things from my former time as a state employee and now in the human resources world that we talk about, when we talk about, employee retention and recruitment. And as many of you understand, this legislature really is kind of the board of directors of all of our state employees, because we're their, HR function in many ways. And so we do have several things in the budget to do compensation, which is certainly part of the package to attract state employees and hopefully keep them. But there are some other things, in the industry that we do. And we did a great thing up until 2012 in this body or in this state, where we had a pretty robust internship program. And so the state of Wyoming would pay students, mostly from Wyoming community colleges or University of Wyoming or Wyoming students at other places, who'd come back for the summer and give them, a decent salary for those 3 months of the summer, get them trained and kind of understand state government and their respective agencies. And then in many cases, assuming they'd be a good fit, when positions opened up, they were recruited and retained here in Wyoming. And so part of my ask on this amendment is for money to have that internship program come back through A&I. And I think we had 14 agencies participating at previous years, and they'd all have an intern or two, and some still do, on their own funds, and have just kind of seasonal summer work. Our state fair has some, state parks and cultural resources. This benefits other agencies in trying to get Wyoming kids primarily to stay with state government, which, as many of you know, are some of the best jobs with good benefits we have in our state. Second part of the amendment is for professional development. This is a new buzzword and endeavors in the private sector, is really trying to keep your employees happy and continue to train them with professional development. And so we do have 2 or 3 different programs in the state of Wyoming that our state employees contracted with already. We have private sector grants we use through Workforce Services that help out the private sectors, train their employees, and get them additional skills and knowledge. And so what I'm asking in this amendment is to allow our state government to explore ways to continue to do that same thing. For those of you who aren't familiar kind of with being a state employee, many times our state employees, to continue to stay in state government and work their way up, have to jump between agencies because there's not always clear paths forward. And so I think any kind of professional development, training that keeps them satisfied in their job, keeps them learning new skills, and then certainly benefits the agency is a good thing. And so you also see I made sure that these were current state employees and that AA and I would have a function to ensure that they remain state employees after the training, or they'd have to pay back those funds. So happy to answer any questions, ask for your favorable I vote.
Representative Bear for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a question for the bringer of the amendment. How many of these long-term employees will be serviced by this $150,000 training?
Representative Davis for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm a little bit confused. We stuck $5,000 in there to study about moving centralized government to other parts of the state. And now we're trying to recruit people that we're not sure where they're gonna be in the state. So I'm a little confused on if we're putting the cart before the horse on this one. Maybe we ought to hold back a little bit and see what the first study that we're studying is gonna do.
Representative Penn for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just ask the bringer as well, if on the interns, or do we currently have interns? I understand you said that we're bringing back a program, but do we currently have interns, and how many would this service, and do they need to be paid? I've done a lot of internships, and free of charge. The reward is knowledge and experience. Thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the bringer? Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Going backwards in order, we estimate roughly $12 an hour, 13 weeks in the summer, about 5,000. So this would be about 20 interns, give or take, depending on the structure, the way the program used to work. Colleges get out at certain times, go back in at certain times. And so from what I remember, these were primarily 12-week or 13-week internships. The second part of the question, I guess it doesn't matter to me where the state employees live. Actually, I think sometimes the state employees in Cheyenne get benefits because we have a community college here, we're closer to the Front Range, but this would be open to all state employees throughout Wyoming through this program. And we do have a lot of our longer serving state employees are actually in our more rural areas. Those are the really kind of solid, good government jobs with benefits, while the other spouse runs the homestead or the farm or whatever. And so I think sometimes those employees outside of the greater capital area don't get the professional development training and the access to these opportunities that sometimes those of us in Laramie County get. And so I don't think it actually interferes or interacts with the study about if they want to move to Fremont County. We actually have lots of state employees in Lander, in Evanston, who I think could be benefited by some professional development funds to keep them feeling that they're at the top of their games in their job, right? It's in all of our interest to have highly qualified people working for us, and that usually requires additional training. And with the cut in a lot of staff that we've done in this body over the past 6 years, we are asking our current state employees to do more than ever before. And so I think it's important as some of these other jobs go away, they need to make sure we have adequate training and skills to be able to lead our state.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 1 signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 1 has failed. Third reading amendment number 3 is next. Representative Strzok.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 1. And this is asking for $500,000 from the Wyoming Tourism Reserve and Projects account for the state fair to advertise a fair and enhance the visitor experience during the state fair. Ask for your favorable yes on it.
Chairman Zwanitzer for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Generally against the amendment. because our tourism dollars historically are used to attract people from other states to visit Wyoming, and I love the Wyoming State Fair, but I'm not sure why we would be spending money to, there's lots of great things about Wyoming, and maybe it can be included. It just seems interesting for $500,000 from our tourism funds used. They do all sorts of metrics and matrices to figure out where to target and how to target. Certainly the state fair can be included. I'm not sure if I saw some billboards, I'd want to go to another state's state fair. And I don't think these money should be used to advertise internally to us to visit our own state fair and our tourism dollars. So I'm just thinking $500,000, $500,000, it's just a little bit too much of the tourism account to be marketing internally to go to the state fair.
Chairman Eklund for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, so it's my understanding that our tourism people are on board with this amendment. Not all of their dollars are targeted toward out of state. This is a tremendous boon to the state of Wyoming, and it does target a lot of dollars from out of state too. But it seems to me that if they're on board with using their money for it, that maybe we should support that.
Representative Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this morning, as our committee met, we sent an email out to this board, and they said they did not have a position on this amendment, that they were neither for nor against. And so I think it's important, but I think it's important to note that they can spend money for this now. They don't have to be directed by us. If they think that this is a good place for tourism dollars, they can do that. Now, I'll also share with you, we are so impressed with what the director over the state fair has done over the last few years. Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. And what we've done is we recognize that, and I want to share with you just what the JEC has done in recognition of that effort. So they came in our capital construction bill, and they've prioritized how they really want to redo that whole physical facility. And they were hoping to get $434,000 this year to take care of their phase one priority, to tear down a dormitory named after a great Eastern Shoshone chief and the fort that was named after him in the center part of the state. We adopted that. Then we added another $500,000 in on top of that to help further move down that priority list. Then when the budget bill came around, we put in another $500,000 to be so that they could generate matching funds to go into the endowment. So I think that we've really made an effort in this supplemental session to address a lot of things that are taking place at the state fair. Again, would note that the tourism board can put funds toward this now, and so I would encourage you to no vote and support the state fair.
Chairman Brown for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment, and only for like 3 words in this entire amendment, and it's because I don't know what this, I guess it's 4 words, ultimately what this means, and it's enhance the visitor experience. That is so broad and so outside of the scope of what we would typically legislate, the experience. Is that new bathrooms that we're going to develop? Is this bringing in porta potties? Is this, what are we doing with $500,000 to enhance the visitor experience during the state fair? And my concern with this is when we start going into a experience that we know is already good, and as the good Vice Chairman of Appropriations just mentioned, the amount of money that we're already putting into this, I'm just worried about using tourism dollars to enhance that experience. If that's the case, it needs to be, this is something that needs to be done through an appropriate budget, and have the Department of Agriculture come back and ask for whatever these enhancements may need to be. On and against.
Representative Alaman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm on and for this amendment. We're getting back to Western heritage. Let's spread our Western heritage throughout the states around us. We have a lot of people coming through the state at that time, and I think they would enjoy it just as they do the rodeo up by the park, or you know, the big tower that the aliens used to visit. I think they'd very much enjoy knowing and going to our state fair. Thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Davis for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, this seems to be a pretty good deal, I would think, for the state of Wyoming. We can look around at the Frontier Days here in Cheyenne, enhanced in advertisement there. I realize it's not a state fair, but the National Western Stock Show just across the border that some of us had the chance to visit. I think by bringing this to the state fair, it may enhance the competition in our livestock. You know, bringing outside competitors into the state of Wyoming will surely enhance the competition. And then also, if we circulate these dollars around the state of Wyoming through advertising, that's economical stimulus to the local community. So I can't see anything but win-win on this one.
Representative Jennings for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'm taken a little bit aback by a couple of speakers ago. I mean, we like to trust our government agencies for spending this money, and it's already a directive in our statutes that they do promote the state fair. And I, for one, I'm okay with if they enhance the restroom facilities.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Strzok, would you like to speak again?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is a statute, 1110-102E. It requires the Office of Tourism to promote the fair. And we have let this interpretation be rather lax over the years since it became law in 2018. And so this is a one-time appropriation that it may become more permanent in the 3-year average of tourism fundings turns out to be as steady as we think it might be. So I just really ask for a favorable eye on this, and please promote this tourism. It does bring a lot for our state. And if we don't, we're going to lose our state fair. And it is very important to the children coming up. And I just really would ask for an eye on this. Thank you.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 1 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 1 is passed. Division being called. All those in favor, please rise. All those opposed, please stand. Third reading amendment number 3 has passed. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Ellerman? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Excused. Nicholas? Nemec? Northrop? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Knapp, no to aye. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 30 aye, 31 no, 1 excused.
Third reading amendment number 3 has failed. Third reading amendment number 18, the corrected copy. Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 18 to House Bill number 1. Folks, this is a corrected copy, and I hope you can take a look at the corrected copy online. This is an important effort, and I want to take you back to the beginning of the session when we discussed the rules of this body. And we had a long debate on a rule that I brought that said that we would, for every increase in the budget, we would have a takeaway. In second reading 2 days ago, we tended to increase. I tried a couple of decreases to the budget, and that did not seem to be what the body really wanted to do. So today, sensing your desire to spend money on certain things, I'm hoping that we can find agreement on moving the money from one place to another. So in this particular case, we go back to the cultural fund. And we had a long discussion about that, so I won't rehash what that fund does. But if you recall, we spent enough money to fill that fund up, the coffee can or the endowment fund, if you will, to the goal. I believe that was $30,000 or $30 million that we were trying to reach. And so we doubled up the money that was in there and got that fully funded. But if we look back to the executive's recommendation for this particular budget, that was $8 million. So what I'm presenting here is an opportunity to go back to the executive's suggested $8 million. And remember, this is a fund where we receive donations from outside sources. And so those sources will be able to continue to contribute. And based on the letter from the executive, he felt that this amount of money would spark enough investment from outside sources to fully fund the fund within, I believe it was 12 or 24 months, so in a very reasonable amount of time. And that's a bit of a takeaway from what we did on Wednesday. In exchange for that takeaway, we're offering to not only fund some essential services, in this case, DD services, for those who are most needy amongst us, okay? And not only are we funding those things, but we're actually increasing slightly. That's more of a math issue. I just wanted to make sure that the money that we're taking from the cultural fund equals the money that we're putting into the DD services for the Department of Health. And so the actual move, as you can see in the amendment, is $6.5 million. Now, literally, this is still an increase of $8 million from the JAC's budget. Well, actually, the JAC came out with $6 million. The governor was $8 million, so it's actually only an increase of $2 million from JAC. So with that, I ask for your favorable consideration of this amendment. And let's see if we can just get our spending where we're a little bit more give and take and direct it a little bit more toward these essential services. Thank you.
Representative Larson for your first time.
Mr. Chairman, as I look at this, I think the problem that you have is on the lower half of the page where you put money into to enhance these services. You're doing it with one-time money. So the money that we appropriate on the upper end is just one time. The requirement down below is ongoing. So then the enhancements you do down below would be 1 year. So I think, Mr. Chairman, what I'd like to do is to divide this amendment. And I would have Division 1 be lines 1 through 8. And divisions, well, let's see, it would be, yeah, Division 1 would be lines 1 through 8, I guess, and Division 2 would be 9 through 23.
Representative Larson, I don't think 1 through 8 works. Corrected copy. I have my corrected copy.
Oh, that's right.
So you need to get a corrected copy.
Mr. Chairman, I would remove my motion to divide.
Okay. Representative Larson, the other.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to divide third reading amendment 18 to House Bill 1. Division 1 will be lines 1 through 3 and 7 through 10. Division 2 will be lines 4 through 6. And Division 3 will be lines 11 through 26. And we'll take Division 1 first.
Okay, Division 1 is 1 through 3 and 7 through 10, is that correct? I believe that is divisible. Which one would you like to proceed with?
Division 1 first, please.
So Division 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we just hashed this out a few days ago, and I just encourage a no vote on Division 1.
Division 1 for your first time. Representative Bear.
On and against the division, I would remind everyone back to when we had the discussion about the rules. And if you have a chance, I would encourage you to go back and take a look at the rule that I brought. And it distinctly had that the amendments that would go to the budget bill would not be able to be divided. That's what we're doing right now, and I need everybody to pay attention and understand that this is why we would want a rule that they can't be divided. This destroys the purpose of the amendment to have an offset. So what happens is we remove the importance of having an offset
Did you call a point of order? Okay, point of order. What's your point?
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the discussion on the rule, but the amendment is whether we keep this appropriation in or not. We already have in our rules that we can divide. And so I think we're on this amendment, and I think the conversation thus far on this one is not on the amendment.
So Representative Larson, I think that you're both right. So I think, you can talk about a rule we talked about, but that's really not germane to the discussion on this division. This division, it's fair to talk about the entire division as we talk about Division 1, because ultimately the bringer of the amendment brought an entire amendment. If he wants to talk about the totality of that as it relates to Division 1, that's entirely his prerogative. But I think talking about a rule that failed is not germane to this discussion. Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. and I appreciate the guidance. Just wanted to refresh everybody's memory, but having said that, the goal of this amendment is to have an offset. So if we divide it in such a way that we're voting on one part and then not the other, or when we vote the other, what we will see, based on the performance of this body earlier in this week, is the decrease that I mentioned when I presented the amendment. That will be stricken down, most likely by this body, and the increase will be passed. So I knew that that was a possibility when I created this, because we don't have a rule that discourages or disallows the division of these amendments. So let's keep that in mind. And this part here, actually, I guess I would be for, because this is, again, part of the reduction part. So I will be on and for this division.
Anybody else for their first time on Division 1? Representative Locke for your first time on Division 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am on and for this division and the entire amendment. Here we are doing exactly what we really should be doing, is moving some of this money from some of these other areas into the areas where we can support our most needy. I think that's where we ought to put our focus. And what we are doing is we're taking more of a balancing, trying to balance the budget approach. I think that's very important for us to take that approach in how we spend and how we utilize our money. Thank you.
Representative Stiff for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, on and against Division 1, the extra $6 million that we put into the Cultural Trust Fund is not spending, it's savings. That money doesn't vaporize, it stays there forever. So this is savings. On and against Division 1.
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Banks for your first time on Division 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This was the recommendation of the amount by the chief executive, and he understood and recognizes that this 6.5 million can be better spent with essential services. Because we heard a lot about we had to cut, oh, now we got to go back and refill these cuts. The ability to put this 6.5 million to essential services so that we don't have to do that anymore was a responsible choice the chief executive made, and I believe that we have a responsibility as well to see that take place. When we come down to hard times, are we going to be thankful we've got a trust fund for cultural resources, or are we going to be thankful we have health services? So on and for this amendment.
Representative Walters for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against this division. And as the chief executive prepared his budget, he really prepared it as he looked into one-time versus ongoing expenses. And so by putting this money into the corpus of the trust there, that is a one-time expenditure. We don't have to count on that being ongoing. If we do see a decline in our revenues, we won't have to fund the end of these things because this is a one-time. So again, on and against.
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Penn for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So with regards to the comment about spending versus saving, I would say that we are spending still because we're spending taxpayer dollars. We're taking it out of their pocket, and we may be putting it in a savings account, but it's an account that can only be spent on specific things. And so we're taking money from someone else and spending it into a savings account, but without a lot of input from them.
Anybody else for their first time? Sorry. Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the bringer of the division? Representative Larson JT bring us home on Division 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, if you like to save money, vote against this amendment. Vote no, thanks.
All those in favor of Division 1 for third reading amendment number 18 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Division 1 has failed. Division being called. All those in favor of Division 1, please stand. So do all those opposed to Division 1, please stand. Thank you. Division 1 fails 26 to 34. Representative Larson, JT, on your next division, which one would you like to take up?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to take up Division 2.
Division 2, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm on in favor of Division 2. Our communities have asked for this, and it shows through private investment, as I've from my remarks the other day. So vote aye on this amendment, or this division.
Anybody like to speak on Division 2? Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we failed Division 1, which was the takeaway. And so now we have a give of approximately $200,000. And again, I mentioned that I did that to make the math work. So now we don't have the takeaway. We're back to where we were on Wednesday after the vote on an amendment that fully funded the Cultural Trust Fund. So now I'm going to recommend that we vote no on this because all we're doing is increasing the overall funding by $200,000, and we've made no offset whatsoever. On and against the division.
Yeah. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just quick correction. I believe it's $2 million would be the increase that we're going to give the Cultural Trust Fund. And I think it's a great amendment to, save more money in this trust fund for the future with inflation. Certainly that's been the goal for 15 years, but inflation's cut that down. So the extra $2 million to inflation-proof the Cultural Trust Fund for the benefit of all Wyomingites, I think is a great idea.
Anybody else for their first time on Division 1? Representative Trujillo for your first time.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Against this amendment. I need an explanation on how to take to my constituents that we're going to increase the bucket to cultural resources rather than Department of Health.
Anybody else for their first time on Division 2? Representative Locke for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm against this amendment again because we're increasing the budget, and I think we need to take more of a balanced approach to this process. And kind of similar to the previous speaker, we need to be able to speak to our constituents in a way that says, hey, we're not trying to constantly spend, we truly are trying to balance and look for the right use of these resources on and against.
Anybody else for their first time on Division 2? Anybody for their second time on Division 2? Chairman Zwanitzer for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to help with some explanation to my good colleague from Laramie County about her constituents, if you look at Amendment 25, I'm going to save $1.5 million and give it back to this body in one of my amendments.
Stay on this amendment, Chairman Zwanitzer.
Then I would say I think this is important to save for the future, and it doesn't hurt anything for other departments or other agencies for us to dedicate these funds to the long-term future of Wyoming. These activities go to our children and help them understand that part of having a good quality of life in Wyoming, which is why so many people move here, it's not only for our economics and our taxation structure, but it's for the amazing quality of life opportunities we have, and this Cultural Trust Fund enhances those.
Anybody else for their second time on Division 2? Representative Bear for your second time.
So I'd like to make a correction. Sorry, I was working off of my printed out sheet that was prior to the corrected. And when I spoke earlier, I was talking to Division 3. So we're on Division 2, and the good previous speaker was accurate that this is a $2 million increase to the Cultural Fund. I want to remind everyone that the Cultural Fund, based on the amendment that was passed on Wednesday, was fully funded. We put $14.5 million in there, bringing us up to $30 million. And so this division, by and in of itself, does add 2 million above and beyond the goal. So this would take our cultural fund to 32 million. So again, on and against the amendment.
Representative Trujillo for your second time.
We just had a previous debate on funding the state fair, which would bring tourism to Wyoming and enhance the cultural way of Wyoming. And that was quite a debate on that. And then here we are trying to add to the cultural resources, which was, we just had an argument on that and a lot of people were against that. I don't understand that portion of the thing. And as far as mental health right now, this is a big thing in Wyoming. It's a big thing with our education. And I look at it as a savings to people's mental state rather than a savings to somebody's pocket.
Anybody else for their second time for the bringer? Larson JT, bring us home.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to remind the body that 2.5 million has already been deposited into this fund from that 14.5. So it's really just an additional 12. And then with this amendment, it would be an additional 2 on top of that. So, and then, you know, Wyoming has a long history of, especially cultural history. And I just think that this is really important to showcase our, to people coming to our state, that we support our cultural history. And I just ask you to vote aye on this amendment.
All those in favor of Division 2 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Chief Clerk, please call the roll because it would be an increase.
Allemand? No. Allred? Aye. Andrew? No. Angelos? No. Banks? No. Bear? No. Berger? Aye. Brown? Aye. Burkhart? Aye. Byron? Aye. Chadwick? Aye. Chestick? Aye. Clouston? No. Conrad? Conrad? Crago? Aye. Davis? No. Eklund? Haroldson? No. Harshman? Heiner? No. Henderson? Aye. Hornock? No. Jennings? No. Knapp? No. Larson Lloyd? Aye. Larson JT? Aye. Lawley? No. Locke? No. Nyman? No. Newsom excused. Nicholas? Nemec? Northrop? Oakley? Obermueller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? No. Penn? No. Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washit? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers?
Aye.
Are there any changes? Brown, aye to no. Nicholas? Nicholas, no to aye. Yin? No to aye. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 30 aye, 31 no, 1 excused.
Division 2 has failed. Representative Larson JT on Division 3.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just ask the body to vote your conscience on Division 3.
Representative Larson Lloyd.
So what this Division 3 would do is it would add $200,000 of federal funds and $200,000 of general funds into the DD providers. So let me tell you, I think we had a good discussion on the request to bring these guys up to the level of funding that they need to be. When we go through this, it's not arbitrary. We don't just throw a number out there and let it hit the wall and see what sticks. The 6.3 is what the Department of Health, what the agency has looked at to get them to where we need to be. And so to quote the good chairman of appropriations, pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. And so we don't need the addition here. So I'd encourage you to just vote this amendment down and stick with what we'd passed in second reading and in the bill.
Anybody else for the first time? Anybody for their second time? First time. Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, on and against this amendment, in an effort to have the offset. I spoke to this earlier, so I won't spend a lot of the body's time, but I would encourage a no vote.
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Locke for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just reinforcing that. Again, I'll probably say it many times a day, but we need to take a more balanced approach on and against.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their first time? Second time? Representative Larson Lloyd for your second time.
Thank you. And again, I think that's what I was saying, is to vote no on this amendment. That we, as much as we'd like to have it, we don't need it. It got us where we need to. Please vote no.
Larson JT's good. So all those in favor of division number 3 signify by saying aye. All those opposed? No. Division 3 has failed. Third reading amendment number 19 would be, excuse me? No, we went through 18 with the divisions. It's third reading amendment number 19. Representative Nicholas. Majority Whip Western, would you come take the helm of the ship for a minute?
The next amendment for consideration is third reading number 4 to House Bill 1. Representative Steth.
Mr. Chairman, I move third reading amendment number 4 to House Bill 1 and ask for your favorable consideration. This amendment is frankly a bit difficult to read, but here's what it does. It restores the funding sources for the Board of Control inside this agency where the engineer for the state works, so that it is funded from the water account 1. So it's funded essentially by severance taxes. So this is about a $7 million item. So for this next year, and this is actually what we originally did in last year's budget. So essentially what this amendment does is it preserves the status quo, and it makes sure that the legislature controls who gets to make this decision? Because there is another bill on the other, down the hall, there's another bill down the hall that would change the funding to essentially the general fund for this division inside our agency that has our engineer for the state. So the policy question here is, if our chief executive, if both of these, if the budget passes as is, and if the bill down the hall also passes, then which one controls depends upon which order the chief executive signs it in, and we would rather make that decision than allow the chief executive to do so. So what this amendment says is that the budget bill will control, and the budget bill says that the funding for this division will be funded out of water account 1. So I know I would stand for any questions.
Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Davis for your first time.
Mr. Chair, maybe you could explain to me the reason for the delete 2 and then only put 1 position in is a little concerning to me, because with the ongoing drought in the west, I don't even know if 2 positions will be enough to handle what the state of Wyoming is looking at. These people.
Point of order.
Representative Wannister, state your point.
I believe we're on Amendment 4. Isn't that correct? Not Amendment 19, Mr. Chairman?
Chairman Wannister, that is correct.
Okay.
Representative Davis?
No point of order.
Representative Davis, we are on amendment number 4. Third reading amendment number 4.
Third reading amendment number 4. I must be confused. I beg your indulgence.
Not a problem. Any further discussion to third reading amendment number 4? Representative Locke for your first time.
Thank you, and I just want to ask the presenter of the amendment if you could explain just a little bit better. Is this additional funding? Is it just changing the funding source? I just wanted some additional information so we could fully understand. Again, maybe less of a concern on some of the issues, but I just want to understand additional funding or changing the source. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Eklund.
Mr. Chairman, Majority Whip, I would ask the same question. As I read it, it does what I've in general been opposed to, and that is includes our regulatory people in with water development. We originally had the 2 separate, and this would take funding out of water development by using it to fund part of the state engineer's office.
Any further discussion on amendment number 4 to House Bill 1? Anyone else for their first time? Representative Stith for your second time.
Mr. Chairman, so if you look at our budget bill on page 34, under line 14, you'll see that this division of this agency, which controls the board, I guess, right now it's funded from the budget that we did last year. It's funded completely with other funds. And so what this amendment does is it keeps it that way and says that if there's another bill that makes it through the process, that the budget will control and we will keep the funding from the other funds, that is the Water 1 account, as we passed last year. So essentially this amendment says there's no emergency, so let's keep things the way they were from how we passed the budget last year. On and forth, thank you.
Sensing the urge to vote, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 4 to House Bill 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. Third reading amendment number 4 is adopted. Next amendment for our consideration is amendment number 20. Amendment number 19. Chairman Nicholas. Adopted.
Guess we'll stand at ease for a minute. Chairman Nicholas.
So ladies and gentlemen, just to explain what's going on, there's an amendment being drafted. And once that amendment is drafted, House Bill 19 will be withdrawn. And there will be a new House Bill 44 that will come after it. Then it'll come up on your computer as soon as it's published. So we're waiting for that to be published. It's drafted, but so just be stand at ease for a bit. Should be popping up in a minute or two.
Chairman Nicholas, do you want to withdraw third reading amendment 19 then?
Yes, I will be once it's published.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
What's your point?
I just want to know, I thought we were supposed to get the amendments in by a certain time yesterday and approved a certain time today, but they're still being drafted. So I'm just curious about that. Thank you.
Representative, the good chair of appropriation has the authority to bring amendments to the budget bill anytime on third reading. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you. I would withdraw third reading amendment number 19.
Third reading amendment number 19 to House Bill 1 has been withdrawn.
And now, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Nicholas.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you look on your computer screen, published is third reading amendment number 44, and I would move third reading amendment number 44. And it's essentially identical to third reading number 19. The only difference is that if you look at that line 6 and 7, it deletes the new position. So the $600,000 remains going to the state engineer's office, but the position itself is removed.
Has everybody found that online? Does anybody want to speak to this amendment? Representative Jennings, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could you elaborate a little more if we're going to eliminate the position but leave the money there? That seems like a pretty good bonus.
Chairman Eklund, for your first time.
Yeah, I'm a little confused too. So do we have one position? This would be for the drainage on the west side that is so critical to our people there, and having experts that can help with that process. All of it, to me, I don't know how I stand on what we do in the budget either, because your ag committee worked a bill that would be really comprehensive on this same thing, I believe. And that's one I want to see pass. It would codify some things, and we could amend it to say what we need it to say without having to deal with the budget. So I'm a little torn. I don't know whether to get a second bite at the apple or use this as a bargaining chip to get that one up.
Representative Davis for your first time.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm like the good chairman, a little bit confused here. Which position are we leaving? Which position are we leaving the funding for that we're not going to fill the position? And with the ongoing drought, I'm a little concerned with how this would really benefit the people of Wyoming by leaving a position that is needed, not filled.
Representative Bear for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I applaud the good chairman of Appropriations move here to reduce by one employee the number of employees that the state has. I am a little bit curious about why this employee, which employee, as the questions have been asked before, and considering the concern on the chairman of Ag's question and points, I'm not sure it's the right position to remove. I applaud the idea of reducing our employees since we have so many employees compared to other states our size and with our type of lifestyle. So if the good bringer of the amendment, the chairman of Appropriations, could explain how this decision was made. And I too am curious, as was the good representative from House District number 30, as to why the funds are being left there after the position's being removed. Thank you.
Representative Walters for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment. And so over the last 2 years, including this year, we've added before this amendment, we would have added 3 positions to this agency for work on the Colorado River. As we've discussed it over the last couple of days in the House Appropriations Committee, we felt like there's plenty of positions to do the work, but what we really need in this agency is the ability to go out and contract with professionals on specific needs and have the 2 positions that are already there and actually are unfilled at this point because the agency is having struggles to even find individuals to come do the work. So having that money available makes lots of sense where we can go out and contract with individuals to do specific needs for the Colorado River research. I think everyone in this body recognizes how important the Colorado River is and the downstream users' negative effects that they'll have on Wyoming and our lifestyle in Wyoming. So there is no desire here to remove actions and not be able to have Wyoming in the best position possible. But the real desire here is to make sure that we can get contracted work done on specific issues within this and have the positions that are there already, as soon as they're filled, be able to kind of coordinate that work. So what position is it? It's positions that are already there in line. This was adding one more, was the JAC position. And then as we further reviewed it, we said, hey, this is a better use of our dollars to focus it like this. So hopefully that helps to ease some of those concerns, but the money is still there and it will be used for contract work, which is the best, most specific use possible.
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Locke for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is just a question to the bringer. And maybe I'm crossing the line here, I hope not to, but in the First Amendment, of course, there was a decrease in the budget. Is it intentional that it is not in this amendment, that there is no decrease to the budget? Thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Davis, are you interested? Representative Davis, for your second time.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I think we've already done a little bit what the good representative is saying by funding the request for a modeling. That would be an outsource or a contract position for this here. But what we're dealing with here is we have 3 people in the state of Wyoming, the engineer and an attorney and one other person, that are trying to run this battle against this taking of Wyoming water from the lower basin states. So I can't understand why you would not want to have more people and let the department, the engineering department, figure out what positions it is they need filled instead of us trying to fill and follow their mindset. Thank you.
Anybody else for their second time before the bringer? Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you. In favor of the amendment, ladies and gentlemen. So there are two positions that are now vacant that we have already funded. One we created last year, and one we created this year. Those have not been filled. And so in the zeal to work on the Colorado River Compact issues, instead of just taking a handful of mud and throwing against the wall and said, let's throw a bunch of positions in there, our position is, let's get those two positions in there, fill them, hire the contractor to do the study, which is the most important component of this amendment. If they need more folks, they need to come and tell us. They didn't ask for this. They asked for the money, but they didn't ask for the position. And so we're just, and they haven't filled two positions. So we're just being thoughtful on taking responsible steps. Are we going to protect our water? Absolutely, to the nth degree. But you don't do it for a position they didn't ask for, and we don't know for sure what that position even is going to be. So on and in favor, please.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 44 to House Bill 1 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 44 to House Bill 1 has failed. Division having been called. All those in favor, please stand. Thank you. All those opposed, please stand. Less than 37. Third reading amendment number 44 to House Bill 1 has passed. The next amendment is third reading amendment number 20. Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move third reading amendment number 20 to House Bill 1 and ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, most states own no aircraft. A few states have one. Wyoming has two. We spend about $2.5 million a year to maintain these jets and about $12,000 an hour to operate the same. We pay a full-time crew to man these jets. I wanted to be able to show you a photo of these. And if you could see that photo, you would realize that, like this body, they don't use props. Perhaps we should again consider selling one or both. I'm recommending both, and that's what this amendment does. In doing so, we could pocket the money from the sale, we could reduce our carbon footprint, and we could support struggling Wyoming Air Service and charter airlines. I got a phone call from my adopted ex-stepbrother a couple of days ago, and he sells legal drugs from the building with the big blue roof. He mentioned that some of his clients were having to postpone needed surgeries because the drugs they required weren't available due to frequent and prolonged road closures. He stated that they had not received several shipments recently due, which caused these critical shortages. He and I grew up in Wyoming, and we agreed that the road closures seemed to be more frequent, and we wondered why. And I have been told that one of the reasons is that we have a critical shortage of snowplow drivers and state troopers. Perhaps we could redirect funds from the sale of these aircraft to recruit more drivers and troopers. Maybe if we had a little left over, we could get a piano. Thank you for your consideration.
Representative Haraldson, for your first time, let's stay on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will do my best to not talk about anything other than the amendment. So I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of a perspective. One of the things you have to understand is this It really is the question, should we own or should we lease? And so I was just like, what does it actually cost for this concept? So what you have to understand is the state owns 2 large charter jets. They're considered large jets, not in the realm of like a 747 large jet, but in the realm of like a large Learjet. And so it's one of those things where in our private lives, I don't always pull out my big diesel pickup truck to drive to the grocery store. Sometimes I jump in my little car type of deal. And so looking at charter costs, let's say we have 4 passengers and we need to fly them within 2.5 hours of home at 391 mile an hour. That's going to cost us $3,000 an hour to do. We don't have to pay insurance. We don't have to pay tax, or not that we'd have to pay taxes. We don't have to do the upkeep. That's $3,000. We can charter a flight for 4 individuals to fly from the airport in this town to anything within roughly 900 miles. What about going up, and let's say we want to do 8 passengers and we want to put them within 2,000 miles. That's going to cost us $5,000 to charter that entire plane. Let's say that, we need to take a ton of people. We need to take up to 50 passengers, which is larger than any planes we own. And we want to go within roughly 5,000 miles of our location. So that's anywhere in the United States. It's going to cost us $12,000 per flight hour. We're losing money on these jets, you guys. And then the reality is this: every time we try to upgrade one of these jets, we're going to lose more money. I'm not saying we shouldn't fly. In fact, we probably should fly more often. But let's do it in such a way that we turn around and just change how we actually do these jets and how we run these jets. So I'm saying let's fly, but let's fly on someone else's in someone else's plane. Let's do it in such a way that we can save some money, maybe even get more individuals into a plane, and at the end of the day, we can even be in nicer planes and nicer jets. So I would definitely encourage an aye vote on this amendment to save our state and to also give us a better opportunity. Thank you.
Representative Bear for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a question, well, first of all, on and for the amendment, but a question for the bringer of the amendment. There was a mention of a crew and pilots, and I don't know that that's addressed in this amendment. Maybe somebody can explain what would happen to those. Are they state employees? Are there benefits? If I could just get an answer on that, please.
Representative Northrup for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My older brother flies these planes for a business, and that business is chartering clients to go to and from wherever they choose. It's $7,000 to step onto the plane and fly from Baltimore to wherever, to a short flight. So it's very expensive to fly planes now. Fuel costs are gone up quite a bit. But I think that we need to save what we've got, because it'll cost us more money if we decide that we're going to be moving our people around all the time.
Chairman Nicholas for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So on and against the amendment, ladies and gentlemen. This lovely amendment comes up just about every year, and so we beat it down for the last 14 years that I'm aware of. But initially, I actually kind of supported the concept, and then, but if you do the homework, and then it's important that you do the homework, and you also need to go out and find out what our planes do and and who they serve. Something like, and I don't have the hard figures, but 70 to 80% of these planes are used primarily by our highway department folks on their work and construction projects, because they usually have anywhere between 30 or 40 projects going on around the state. So they have engineers flying all over the place and working. And if you think about it, if you've got 4 or 5 folks on this plane, and if they're going up to a project, say in the Bighorn Basin, they can go up in one day and come back in one day, and then they can go to another project. If they were doing that in a car, we would lose for those 4 or 5 people, we'd be losing a day going and a day coming back. And so you just don't get the work product done. Now let's take the small percentage that our chief executive uses this, and flies around the state, and he can hit 3 or 4 different places in one day, accomplishing his basic function, which is to educate and speak to the people of Wyoming. It would take a week to do if you did it any other way. And so when you do the economies of scale and time in Wyoming, these are tools that are basically invaluable. And then most other places have aircraft as well. I don't know the numbers. We're trying to get them to dig them out, but I think the good state below us and a little bit to the east has 7 or 8 planes. The good state above us, where the mountains are tall, has 4 or 5 planes. And the reason is they've all realized that there's an economy of scale in having this availability. And so they're incredibly useful. They serve the Wyoming well, and they have for a long time. And by the way, if you try to get rid of these things, you get pennies on the dollar for the aircraft. And so we're just throwing money away. So on and against the amendment.
Representative Alaman for your first time.
A lot of times where the people using these planes have meetings, there's no airport, so they have to rent a car. And there may not be a car rental place, so somebody may have to drive to the location. I don't know how often that happens, but I do know the people of House District 58 that is struggling. And they wonder, why do you have a plane? Why does this state have 2 planes? I can't hardly even buy food. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay my property taxes. Why don't you sell the planes and cut my taxes? Thank you.
Representative Tarver for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Jets are probably the most expensive way to travel. I mean, if it's a time thing that we're talking about, there are much more affordable ways to get around the state. And they would be within a minute or 2 of the same speed. There's also some other ways. I don't know if I can say it, but there's ways to lease aircraft for, say we need to go to Washington, D.C. or a longer leg, we could have a leasing program for that. But they're much more affordable. They're called turboprops, and we could get rid of the jets, go to a much cheaper form of the same type of travel if we absolutely need that in the state. Thank you.
Representative Harshman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a little more information. This amendment is an old friend of the legislature. It's probably the 10th, 12th time we've heard it. These 2 jets we have 3 state airplanes. One's for surveying, then 2 jets that are used around the state. So we have a total of 3 state airplanes. Now, who uses the 2 that we're really talking about? I think most of it is people on boards and commissions. When you serve on the parole board, when they serve, that day they got to go to a parole hearing, they get their $150 just like us. Okay, and so you can't get people to serve on this stuff if you live in Sundance or Jackson or Evanston or someplace that you got to be in Rawlins all the time for parole hearings or wherever it's at. So that's the biggest part of this. But I think the other part is kind of what do our neighbors do? This is also part of the story. So Colorado has 5 state aircraft, Idaho 3, Montana has 22, Nebraska has 3, North Dakota 8, Utah 7. And then, as I said, Wyoming 3. And we've studied this a lot because, again, this is an old friend, and I appreciate it. And it sounds good, but really, in reality, in our big state, and if you want citizens to serve on these so important boards and commissions around the state, that's the safest, cheapest, best way. And you look at our flight charges compared to our neighbors on their state planes, it's not even close. So these 20-year-old planes, we paid cash for, just like we do everything, because that's what conservative people do. We pay our bills, paid cash, They're well-maintained, they're 20 years old, and they're gonna keep going for many, many decades. So I know this sounds good, but in reality, it doesn't work. I mean, so I think we're in a really good spot in Wyoming. So on and against the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Davis for your first time.
This may be a little far-fetched.
Please
Mr.
address the
Speaker,
chair.
Or Chairman. Am I too close to it?
I hear you now. You said, Mr. Chairman, that'll work.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank
I
you.
believe we have a commander-in-chief that has a lot of airplanes and helicopters around. And I think they're at his disposal. So I would think that maybe we could utilize these gentlemen and then get them some more flight time.
Representative Brown. No. Representative Rodriguez Williams for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In regard to the boards that have state volunteers, or volunteers that serve on these state boards, I can tell you in committee number 1, we heard testimony directly from that parole board that they no longer use the state plane.
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Conrad for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I will share with you my time on the Board of Parole as Vice Chairman. It was incredibly critical that we were able to fly and do over 100 hearings over the period of 3 days. The ability to travel from Mount View or Uinta County clear up to Torrington or over to Lusk would have taken me days to get up there. It is absolutely a critical component of our ability to serve this state, and more importantly, in this specific case, on the Board of Parole. There was no other way that we could have been as effective as we are, and I think that effectivity is measured by having one of the lowest recidivism rates in this nation. I would strongly encourage you to vote no on this amendment.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the bringer of the amendment? Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What we're dealing with, yes, they're older, which means more maintenance, luxury jets. As was pointed out in earlier testimony, there's a lot of aircraft in this state, and much of it underneath our command and underneath our control. We also have any number of airlines out there who are trying to fill seats, and we can fill seats on some of those. We've learned from COVID that we have this magic little device that we can look into and speak with somebody all around the world for nothing. Perhaps some of these meetings could be done through that means. There are many, many travel options. I maintain that we don't need these 2 jets. Let's sell them. Let's use the money for something better.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 20 to House Bill 1 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 20 to House Bill 1 has failed. Division being called. All those in favor, please rise. All those opposed, please rise. All right, you may sit. Third reading amendment number 20 to House Bill 1 has failed, 2336. The next amendment for our consideration is third reading. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, when do you want to break? It's probably getting close, huh? One more. All right, let's do one more. Third reading amendment number 21.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to withdraw third reading amendment number 21 to House Bill 001.
Third reading amendment number 21 to House Bill 1 has been withdrawn. So let me count this, I just want to count this here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've done 8 amendments out of 42 or 43. Just food for thought as we move into the afternoon. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House stand in recess until 2 p.m.
Committee announcements, any? Does the good chair of appropriations have any re-referral announcements or anything, or? I don't know. We're gonna come back at 2. Chairman Northrup, or Chairman Burkhardt first, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, will meet at 8 a.m. on Monday morning to consider 2 bills, Senate File 77 and Senate File 78.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a friendly reminder, your GSA high school kids are serving lunch down in the usual lunch spot, and I believe they're serving Thai food today.
Chairman Northrup.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 4, Education, will meet upon noon recess. We're going to do 4 bills, House Bill 203, House Bill 150, House Bill 283, and House Bill 194. Thank you.
Chairman Olson.
Committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, will meet upon noon recess to consider 3 bills, House Bill 279, Voter Identification Requirements, House Bill 204, Allowable Train Lengths, and House Joint Resolution 10, Political Expenditures 2.
Chairman Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 1, Judiciary, will have a joint meeting with our Senate counterparts in the historic Supreme Court chambers at 7:30 on Monday morning, February 6th, to hear a briefing regarding internet crimes against children and an update on the National Incident-Based Reporting System. We will then meet in our meeting room at 8:25 to hear 2 bills, Senate File 23 and Senate File 24.
Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 3 will meet today at 1 p.m. in Meeting Room East number 1, and the bill is House Bill 163, Severance Tax Proportional Refunds. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So just Chairman Nicholas, and then I want to make sure all the other chairmen hear what I have to say. Chairman Nicholas, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Appropriations will meet at 1 o'clock. We'll have House Bill 105, House Bill 250, re-referrals, 98, 130, 222, 271, and if there are any more, let me know.
So for all of you chairmen that have committee meetings on Monday, you've been assigned Senate files. You need to get those noticed. You know, we may be late today, so you need to get those noticed prior to 3 p.m. Is that right, Chief? So committee chairman with Monday meetings, please get those Senate files noticed. Thank you, Chairman Washit, for doing your due diligence there. Chairman Nicholas.
So, and just so folks know, your House Appropriations will also meet on adjournment for any bills that will have re-referrals that you're doing this afternoon. So please let us know.
So you heard the majority floor leader's motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. We stand in recess until 2 p.m.